Did you know that you can use sticks to navigate the ocean? If you've watched my videos for any length of time, you'll probably be asking yourself, why are we talking about sticks? Sticks have nothing to do with navigation, but you'd be wrong. In fact, early humans had a sophisticated understanding of navigation and used an array of tools and techniques to find their way around the world. And yes, sticks were one of them. Join us as we explore the fascinating world of ancient navigation and discover how our ancestors found their way using these simple tools and techniques. We will also look at some of the most incredible examples of ancient navigation, from the Polynesian way of finding their way across the Pacific Ocean to the Inca trails that connected the vast empire. But before we set sail on this journey through time, let me ask you a question. How do you think ancient humans kept track of their location and direction without modern technology like GPS? To answer this question, we need to travel back in time to the early days of human civilization. Back then, people didn't have the luxury of checking their phones or using a compass to find their way around. Instead, they had to rely on their intuition and a little bit of ingenuity. One of the simplest ways that ancient humans kept track of their location was by using the stars. By observing the patterns of the stars in the night sky, they could tell their latitude and even use it to navigate across vast stretches of land and sea. For example, the North Star, also known as Polaris, is located in the northern hemisphere and almost directly over the North Pole. By using the angle of the North Star above the horizon, ancient navigators could determine their latitude and know exactly where they were in relation to the equator. This technique is still used today by sailors and pilots to orient themselves and calculate their position. So you might say that ancient humans were some of the first astronomers. They studied the stars and used their knowledge to navigate the world around them. But the stars weren't the only thing that ancient humans used to navigate. They also used the sun. By tracking the sun's position in the sky throughout the day, they could tell the time and even use it to determine their direction. This technique is known as solar navigation, and it's still used today by some cultures, especially in areas where there aren't many landmarks or other visual cues to help with navigation. For example, the Inca people of South America used a knotted rope device called a quipu to keep track of the sun's position and use it to plan their day. This allowed them to keep track of time without a clock or watch, and it also helped them to stay on schedule with their daily tasks. The Inca were also skilled astronomers who kept detailed records of the stars and planets. They used this knowledge to develop a calendar and to predict astronomical events such as eclipses. This knowledge was not only useful for keeping track of time, but it also helped them to understand the world around them and to predict natural phenomena such as seasons and weather patterns. Ancient humans also used natural features of the landscape to help them navigate. By looking for landmarks such as rivers, mountains, and forests, they could keep track of their location and make sure they didn't get lost. These natural features served as visual cues that helped them to orient themselves and to know which direction they were facing. For example, early humans may have used the position of the sun in the sky to determine which direction they should travel to reach a river or a mountain range. By following the sun's path, they could ensure that they were heading in the right direction and wouldn't get lost along the way. This type of navigation required a keen observation of the natural world and a good understanding of the relationship between the sun and the landscape. But it was an effective way to navigate without the aid of modern technology. Another way that ancient humans navigated was by using sticks, stones, and shells. They would take a stick or a stone and mark it with notches or holes. Then when they needed to navigate, they would use the markings on the stick or stone to help them keep track of their direction. This technique is known as a directional tool, and it's been used by cultures all over the world. For example, the Polynesian people of Oceania used a stick called a wahoo to navigate the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. The wahoo was a simple tool, just a stick with a notch in it, but it was incredibly useful for Polynesian navigators. By using the wahoo, they could determine their latitude and longitude and use it to navigate to different islands. They would take the stick outside, hold it up to the sun, and use the shadow cast by the notch to determine their latitude. They would then use this information along with their knowledge of the stars to determine their longitude and find their way to their destination. The Polynesian way of navigating using sticks and shadows is an impressive feat of human ingenuity. It required a deep understanding of astronomy and mathematics, as well as the ability to read the patterns of the stars and the movement of the sun. Ancient humans also used shells to navigate. They would take a shell and place it on the ground. Then they would walk in a circle around the shell, counting the number of steps that it took to complete one full circle. By counting the number of steps, they could determine the size of the circle and use it to navigate. This technique is known as pacing, and it's been used by cultures all over the world to measure distance and navigate unfamiliar territory. For example, the Inca people of South America used a knotted rope device called a quipu to keep track of their location while traveling. The quipu was a series of knots tied on a rope, and each knot represented a certain distance. As the Inca walked along a path, they would count the number of knots on the rope and use it to keep track of how far they had traveled. This technique allowed them to navigate long distances without getting lost, and it was an essential part of their culture and society. But perhaps the most impressive example of ancient navigation is the Inca trail system. The Inca Empire was vast, stretching over 4,000 miles along the Andes Mountains in South America. To connect their empire, the Inca built an extensive network of trails that allowed for the efficient movement of people and goods. These trails were not just paths through the wilderness, they were engineered structures that featured stairs carved into mountainsides, bridges that spanned rivers, and buildings that provided shelter along the way. The Inca trails were a remarkable feat of engineering, and they allowed the Inca to control and manage their vast empire. The trails were also used for religious and ceremonial purposes. The Inca believed that their empire was a reflection of the universe, and they saw the trails as pathways to the heavens. They decorated the trails with statues and carvings of gods and ancestors, and they used the trails to conduct ceremonies that honored the natural world around them. Today, the Inca trails are a popular tourist destination. People from all over the world come to hike the trails and experience the history and culture of the Inca. The trails are challenging, but the views are breathtaking, and the sense of accomplishment at the end of the hike is truly rewarding. So what can we learn from the ancient humans who came before us? Well, for one, we can learn that they were incredibly resourceful. They didn't have the benefit of modern technology, but they were able to find their way around the world using just a few simple tools and techniques. We can also learn that ancient humans were deeply connected to the natural world. They knew the patterns of the stars and the movement of the sun, and they used this knowledge to navigate. Finally, we can learn that ancient humans were incredibly brave. They explored new lands and charted new routes, and they did so without the safety net of modern technology. In conclusion, ancient humans were masters of navigation. They used the stars, the sun, and the natural features of the landscape to find their way around the world. They developed tools and techniques that allowed them to navigate vast oceans and explore new lands. And they left behind a legacy of exploration and discovery that has inspired us for centuries. So next time you're out exploring the world, take a moment to appreciate the ancient humans who came before us and the incredible skills that they possessed. And who knows, you might even learn a thing or two from them.